recording. All right, there we go. Cool recording. Okay. Well, hello. This webinar is really just going to be about kind of putting nutrition to exercise and how to fuel what you're doing, whether that's hiking, running, playing tennis, doing whatever athletic kind of active thing you like to do. It's really one of my two favorite topics, and if not both of my favorite topics, moving around and eating good food, or at least having some fuel. So a little overview of today is kind of who I am. Why would you even care? Principles of nutrition specifically to exercise, and then the factors that affect the fuel you use when you exercise, how to hydrate to perform your best, which is really a major key in general. And then we'll do a little Q&A part at the end too. So who am I? Just for quickness, like I'm an occupational therapist. I do orthopedics for New Mexico Orthopedics. And then I also am a nutrition coach with a few different certifications through that. And I'll kind of explain what a nutrition coach is versus a dietitian. And then I'm a certified strength conditioning coach, CrossFit coach, USA weightlifting coach, some other things like that, all kind of related to, I used to own a gym and do a lot of training and coaching through that. I'm kind of a lifelong athlete, like to do long endurance stuff. So a lot of long distance triathlons and cycling events and Ironmans and that kind of stuff. So that's mainly my background. And then what a nutrition coach really is somebody that, I see a coach as somebody that has knowledge that can give you a system of how to work through something, kind of be that guide along the way, give you some accountability and some structure, and really let you know that like the things you're doing are correct. And these are the habits and the behaviors that are going to get you to your goal. And when it comes directly to nutrition coaching, that was always the biggest missing component when I'd work with people. They might have been overweight, or they might have been out of shape, or they had a lot of illnesses, and all that came back to what they were putting in their bodies on a daily basis. And that's why I put that little pyramid up there, is really nutrition's the base of everything else. Metabolic conditioning is what we consider like cardiovascular endurance and health, to like moving your body in space, which is gymnastics, to weightlifting, to sports at the very top. So if you don't have that base built in there, then you're going to struggle to put it all together. And if anybody has a question or something along the way, just, you can either put it in the chat, or we can, okay, cool. I'm gonna get the chat up here. I'll look through the chat every once in a while too, but then also, we'll do a little Q&A at the end. If you have a question, just pop it up there if it's pertaining to kind of what we're talking about on that slide too. So the basic nutrition principles, I mean, in all honesty, if you can follow these with relative consistency, then you're pretty much healthier than 95% of people that live in the United States. So if you're following that, the calories in, calories out, that the quantity of what you're eating is what your body needs to support your activity level, that you're getting good quality in your food. So this is going to cover all those micronutrients, vitamins, minerals, fiber, all those other things we need in food that make us healthy. And then what we're going to talk a lot about today, we have somebody else, Tammy, which is hydration and electrolytes. That's going to really support digestion and everything else. Those three major things, along with a couple basic things that I think are important, which are that you need to be hydrated. It said that Tammy joined, but then now I don't see her on here. Oh, there she is. Hey, Tammy.
Oh, hey.
I was just saying, like, if you get questions along the way, just type it in the chat, or we're going to do a little Q&A at the end too. But if you're having some time where you're not eating during the day, you can call this intermittent fasting, or you can call this nighttime and sleeping and having a little downtime. That's huge. And then this one I really put in here more so because this is all for women, is getting enough protein to support your health, your recovery, repairing muscle tissue, growing muscle, and supporting your activity. Those are big ones, along with getting enough high quality carbohydrates to really support activity, where I look at it's like performance and recovery. All right, I got somebody else joining too. Hey, Tiffany. So these basic principles are going to really support pretty much everything you need, but we're going to dig into those a little bit more when it comes to exercise in particular. So I put this little kind of table together of just an overview. I put a day in the life of a hiker. So you're getting ready to go for a hike. Say it's Friday. You're like, okay, I'm going on this big hike tomorrow on Saturday. So the night before, you want to get some good quality carbs, more carbs than anything else. Keep the fiber pretty low. Too much fat and protein is just going to slow the digestion, and you really want to kind of fill your muscles up with glycogen. You know, the olden days, this was called like carb loading. You don't really need to go too crazy into carb loading. If you're eating a pretty healthy diet in general, you're going to have plenty of carbs. You're just topping off the tank, so to speak. Morning of, good carbs, little bit of protein, and really little to no fat, so the digestion isn't slowed down. You know, my favorite is like a bagel with some almond butter on it. That's a an easy, simple, portable combination there. Lots of hydration in there. During the hike, now you're talking about easy to digest carbs, simple sugars. This is the time to get those in when you're moving and using a lot of energy. A little bit of fat's okay, and keep the protein down quite a bit. We'll talk about exact amounts a little bit later. This gets into more of some of the portable nutrition like gels and chews and fruit and even drink mixes. And then after the hike, so within a couple hours at the most, now it's a nice high quality meal. Carbs, good protein, some hydration, and that'll keep you feeling pretty good and performing the rest of the day. So really, I put this slide in here because these are the things that, well, I'll give you an example. So this happens every year in New Mexico, right? Like they have to pull somebody off Sandia because they went up La Luz and they had like one water bottle and it was, July, and they got dehydrated. They didn't realize the elevation was going to affect them. Maybe they were from, Texas, where it was like 1,000 feet elevation. All of a sudden they're at 9,000 feet and they're like, oh my gosh, I've never been dizzy and felt, terrible. Well, that's where I talk about like intensity of the activity. So the conditions, the altitude, the temperature, the humidity, the time of day, how long it's been since you've eaten, those kind of things all factor in. And I'm going to break it down to like what the intensity level can be, and then how to kind of think about fueling yourself with that intensity level. So usually less than an hour. All you need is a little hydration, if anything. Now we get into 90 minutes or less. Maybe just take a bottle if that's all you're planning on. If you get to 2 or 3 hours that you're planning on being out, now you need to hydrate, make sure you got a couple bottles, and start to get a little bit of energy and fuel out of your pocket. And what I mean by that is more solid foods at that point. Maybe you take a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, or you have a granola bar or something like that. When you start getting into the 3+ hour range, now you need to like have a schedule, look at that schedule, maintain it, think a little bit more about what you're going to do and how long you're going to be out there so you don't get in trouble. But let's break that down a little more. So like intensity level 1 would be the temperature's relatively low, elevation's not that high, especially for us already being at 5,500 feet here. Your heart rate's going to stay relatively low. So maybe this is like easy hiking. You're chit-chatting a little bit. You're stopping every once in a while. Heart rate's 60%-ish. And then it's only an hour and a half, maybe max. So this is where all you really need here, maybe one bottle with some electrolytes. Noon is a brand I really like. They're like tablets you can put in the water. LMNT, which just is pronounced element. That's an electrolyte salt you can put in water, and they have some cool flavors. Like they have like watermelon salt, and they have like a habanero lemonade and like some cool ones. Light Show is another electrolyte supplement, and then you can dilute Gatorade and Powerade and all that kind of stuff. you don't really need anything to eat as long as it's not like 7 o'clock in the morning, you haven't eaten since 7 o'clock the night before, then you might take a little something. And if you do take anything, it's a simple carb protein mix, beef jerky and a little bit of fruit, maybe a Lara bar. That's where these portable bars come in really handy, and they're nice and quick. Level 2, this is where we're going to be with most stuff that's a little bit challenging for us. So maybe the temperature's getting up a little bit. You're probably going to sweat a little bit. Maybe you're going all the way to the top of the mountain. So you're going to be at 11,000 feet or something. You're going to get a decent heart rate, up to maybe 75%, relatively sustained. So you're breathing pretty hard. You're still able to talk, but you're breathing pretty heavy. This is going to be your 2 to 3 hour long hikes. This is where stick with the general rule of hydrate from the bottle. So this is where you have, preferably water with a good electrolyte mix, which I'll talk a little bit about the kind of good, better, best, and then fueling out of your pocket. So now it's mostly carbs with a little bit of protein, and you're going to work on a couple hundred calories per hour, depending on kind of your fitness level and everything too. Easy stuff, some pretzels and dried fruit. Maybe it's a cut up peanut butter and jelly sandwich, but you can get into more complicated things like super starches. Those are all mixes you put together. If you're more of a fat adapted athlete, then nut butters are good too. And we'll talk a little bit more about some of those. Can you give an example of fresh fruits? Yes. You probably wrote that a while ago, but bananas are my favorite. They're really dense carbs and they're relatively easy to digest. And when you're talking like simple to digest fruits, we want the fiber to be relatively low. Bananas kind of fit that motto. Apples can be good. You can even take the skin off if you just want more of the apple. Hence, like apple sauces are good. And even baby foods, you can take, like, sounds funny, but like pureed baby foods and stuff. Those are great sources. And then macronutrients. Nicole asked, what macronutrients and what should be the distribution of them? So that's, maybe I caught that now, but when you're out working, like you're doing stuff, it's mainly carbohydrates with just a little bit of protein. Even if you're a pretty fat adapted athlete, and your heart rate's relatively low, so you're probably burning a little more fats than carbs, you need carbohydrates to have your body go through the physiology to burn fats, to get energy, to get ATP out of your body. So this is where, I always look at it as kind of this golden time frame where your body doesn't need insulin. It doesn't need anything to drive the blood sugar out into the muscles. Your muscles are just ready to accept all this stuff right away and keep trying to get that glycogen going into the muscles. So it's kind of that magic window where you can eat really pretty processed carbohydrates that digest easy, and they're actually the preferred source for your body at that point. I love Tailwind Nutrition. It's one I used a ton cycling. I like their mixes. They have a good, it's called like how isotonic they are. So how easily they assimilate into the body and the bloodstream. They have a really high level of that. So they mix easy, they drink easy. You don't get like, sometimes you get overloaded on some of that stuff because it's too sweet or too much. So Tailwind's one of my favorites too. And they have a whole line of like kind of pre, during, post. They have all kinds of good stuff. So intensity level 3, this one is you're working your butt off at this point. You're sweating hard. Your conversation is like, hey, okay, yeah, go, and there is not full sentences at that point. And this is where you really need simple carbohydrates. You need to make sure you have a plan of what you're doing, how often you're drinking. You probably on the higher end of those ounces per hour, maybe 16-ounce bottle every hour with some electrolyte mixes in there. You only need simple carbohydrates at this point with the tiniest amount of protein, which most of like the goos and gels and power blocks and all those things have in them. Honestly, I love baby food purees for this kind of stuff because there's minimal fiber. It's basically just whatever the fruit is. Usually I like some mixed ones that are like apple pear mixes, and there's, banana apple mixes, and they're cheap, they're organic. You can get like 2 of them for $1 kind of thing. Unless you're really experienced and you're a fat adapted athlete and you know that about yourself, you just need to keep hammering carbs for the most part. But if you have some fat adaptation, and there's tests you can do for that and kind of figure it out, you can have some like nut butters and stuff like that during, but I would not experiment with that when you're at this intensity level, which I consider like the hardest working level at this point. So here's kind of a basic fuel list. Like I would say, everything that's under the basic real foods is stuff you've probably all thought about, or maybe even tried, or maybe there's something on there that you're like, oh, that's kind of an interesting thing. Like, what the heck's a date roll? And these are just like super high carbohydrate, easily digested fruits are always going to be some of your best friends. That's why trail mixes and dried fruits are usually at the top, because they're kind of broken down to the point where there's a ton of fructose in them. They're pretty easy to chew. They're basically going straight into your bloodstream. And I would only recommend eating dried fruit when you're exercising. I mean, honestly, it's pretty bad for you otherwise. It's this direct hit of fructose, and it's really hard on your digestive system in terms of blood sugar regulation. But I experiment with all this kind of stuff. I mean, I was a huge, actually, almond butter and jelly fan. I tried everything from watermelon with salt on it to, I mean, you name it. Like, you're out there long enough, you're just like, man, everything sounds good, like I could eat a hamburger when I'm out here, but don't do that. That's too much fat and too much protein. But if you get into the advanced fuel side, now you're talking like some of the drink mixes. Super starches are a really complex carbohydrate that when it gets into the body, there's a low glycemic response. And so it digests really slowly. And UCAN and Vitargo are kind of the two major ones. If you're a pretty conditioned athlete, like those are pretty awesome. I've used them quite a bit, and they're great for just like long sustained fuel. And you don't have to eat a ton of it, which is good for just digestion in your GI system. And I didn't put Tailwind on here, but it is one of my favorites. Like they have a gel, Maritane and Hammer. Those are great ones. Scratch Labs is good. I've had enough goo gels in my life that I don't need any more of those, but they're all basically like almost like a frosting kind of mixture, pretty sugary, sweet. There's quite a bit of carbohydrates in them. And for the most part, you can get old pretty quick. Special help stuff. I mean, caffeine is helpful. Like, a little flat soda when I was late into a race or something, that's great. Even a little diluted soda with water, into your third or fourth hour of hiking or something, that's great too. That'll feel good. And even, I mean, they make little nicotine gums and things too that have, some of the blocks and some of the gels have caffeine and or nicotine in them too. So they can be helpful if you experiment with that, do it in some of your training. Let's talk about hydration. So I really crammed a bunch on this slide. I mean, really what we're looking at here is the first one is your sweat rate. So really performance happens when you're hydrated. If you're dehydrated, your blood volume gets thicker, essentially. It makes it harder for your heart to pump. Pretty quickly, you're not going to feel good, and you're going to fall apart pretty fast. Oh, sorry, Nicole, I missed that one. A fat adapted athlete is somebody that they can preferentially burn fat for fuel depending on the circumstance. Now, having said that, this might be somebody that's relatively keto adapted on a daily basis. They eat kind of a keto lifestyle, a high fat, moderate protein, low carb kind of diet. And you can actually do, and I have a friend that does it in town if you're really interested in it, you can actually do some testing, and you kind of wear this little snorkel looking thing and you do a workout, and it tells you what ratio of carbs to fat you're burning as you exercise, and you kind of ramp up the intensity. But you have to be kind of a special person, and you still need carbohydrates no matter what anybody tells you. If they're like, oh, I'm a fat adapted athlete, they're still going to take carbs in when they're exercising, because without it, your body just can't produce ATP fast enough. The way the the physiology works. You just can't fuel yourself. And then there's also a threshold of the intensity level you can hit. Once you get above about 75% of your kind of max intensity level, your body's switching to carbohydrates for fuel, no matter how fat adapted you are. So that's kind of sorry for that kind of terminology, but that's kind of how that works. So Christine asks, she never heard of nicotine. How does that differ from what's in cigarettes? It doesn't. But what it does differ from is you don't get all the little carcinogens and all the other crap that's in cigarettes, and you're not inhaling it. You're just taking in like pure kind of liquid nicotine, which is really a vasodilator. So it kind of opens up blood flow in the body, which is one of caffeine's effects as well. They're both fat metabolizers, and they're both vasodilators. So that's why sometimes when people have nicotine that they're not kind of used to it, they'll get like kind of red, rosy cheeks and stuff, and they're getting more blood flow into their organs and into their muscles and their blood or their skin. So with our little, probably people have read through this slide too. Sweat rate is what do you weigh before you go out? Then you go out and you hydrate while you do whatever you're doing, a long hike or a run or whatever. And then when you come back, you weigh yourself again. Your sweat rate is the difference in how much you weighed when you left and how much you weighed when you got back. And then you can subtract out how much hydration you drank during. So I know it sounds like a science experiment, but you can really figure out like, man, I sweat a lot, or I didn't even sweat that much, which is really challenging to figure out here because we're at elevation and it's dry. And so you tend to sweat, but not be like dripping sweat. It just kind of evaporates off of you. But this is also where you can look at your clothing. Maybe you wore a hat or a headband. And if you see like these salt lines on it, or, even there's like palpable salt on it, then you lose a lot of electrolytes through your sweat. And this is totally genetic and dependent on humidity and kind of your overall conditioning. So that's what I'm talking about with sweat rate. A general rule of thumb is 12 to 16 ounces per hour. A diluted sports drink, an isotonic drink, which we'll talk about in the next slides. And then you need that kind of mixture of different electrolytes, which our main ones are sodium, potassium, magnesium, and chloride. So we think of like table salt as sodium chloride. Those are the things we want to like get into our body. They help with conduction and with blood volume in general, just kind of keeping the cells hydrated. Thirst during the activity, this sometimes gets forgotten about a little bit. If you're not thirsty anymore and you're kind of working hard, that's a bad sign. Like you need to start drinking, sipping a little bit. And that's where this frequency comes in. Try to take some little sips as much as you can per hour versus like, wow, I haven't drank for 2 hours. And then you chug like 20 ounces of something. That kind of hits your digestive system and it can cause a lot of upset, and you don't even absorb it as well. So think about the amount you're drinking as well as the frequency you're drinking. And then I'm always a big fan of like having a great hydration system, something easy. I mean, now with Camelbacks and everything else, you got like a little sippy straw right to your mouth. I mean, it's not like you're stopping and getting a bottle out and so you can drink stuff pretty easily. Shouldn't really be too much of a convenience factor involved in that. And then the last little kind of cool tip is with gastric emptying, like when things leave your stomach, the best thing is close to room temperature, 70-ish degree water kind of thing. That's the best. Like really, really cold doesn't leave your stomach that fast, and really hot tends to sit in your stomach for a long time. So if you can kind of get that nice comfortable level temperature wise, then you'll stay hydrated a little bit better with that too. All right, so I put this one together because I get this question a lot, or I see people make this mistake, is level 0 is what I called it. I was like trying to think of a nice way to say don't ever drink this crap. But that's like taking a Red Bull with you, or a Reign, or a Monster, or something like that. And it's this caffeinated, sugary drink that, man, it's really rough on your GI system. And all those stimulants are going to dehydrate you quickly and make you feel terrible. And I kind of threw Gatorade and Powerade under the bus here too, because there's so many calories in those. If you're getting like the full calorie version, that there's really minimal hydration happening in between, like getting some electrolytes in. It's really just more sugar than anything. So it kind of overloads that. Now, what you can do in level 1 would be like dilute some of those drinks, like Gatorade, like maybe a 0.5-to-1 ratio of water to Gatorade. So you dilute it quite a bit. Now you're kind of dissipating some of that sugar that's in there. Even better is like some of the non-caffeinated, non-calorie beverage stuff like vitamin waters, coconut water, Propel. Those are all good for, that kind of level 1, maybe level 2 intensity activity. Level 3 is where you're looking at specific electrolytes, like we talked about, those 4 big ones. I mean, Noon is great because they're tablets. You can just throw them into stuff. Oh, there's your Tailwind. I knew I had Tailwind in here somewhere. And Scratch Labs is a great one. Hammer Nutrition. I mean, you honestly can't go wrong if you go somewhere like Sports Systems or something. They have like a whole section of all kinds of hydration and stuff, and you can just get like single serving packs of different ones and try them out at different times and see what you like the best and what you feel the best with. And that's kind of what you should stick with, in all honesty. All right, I couldn't help but throw a little Socrates in here. I like my Greek philosophers. So know thyself. And what I mean by this is everybody's different. Learning what you do when you're in certain conditions and how you function the best with certain types of fuel is really going to be your best friend and your ally along the way. And when we talk about knowing ourselves, I gave you some questions, which I'm going to give everybody this cool PDF that we put together. Emily put it together. I just gave her the information. I don't know how to do all that stuff, but it's going to ask you a bunch of questions. It's going to give you some of the basic fuel lists. It's going to give you some of the supplements. It'll give you the good information out of this whole presentation, in my opinion, but it'll make you think through some of this stuff. So when we talked about like a fat adapted athlete, are you somebody that has to eat a lot? So you have 4 or 5 meals, or you snack all day? Well, you're used to getting a lot of carbohydrates. And so your blood sugar is used to this kind of up and down through the day. And if you don't eat every 2 or 3 hours, you're hypoglycemic and you get, like a little bitchy or whatever happens from there. So that's where it's just kind of be honest with yourself. Like, do you eat a lot of carbs? Is that your main source? Or do you get good proteins in every time you eat? Or do you prefer like protein and fat? You're more animal products and, lots of avocados and nuts and butters and all that kind of stuff too. And that'll tell you kind of what you prefer in terms of fuel. How much do you drink on a daily basis? Because really, hydration has to do with every day, all the time. Not like, oh, I'm going hiking tomorrow, I'm going to drink some water today. Sure, that helps, but your body gets hydrated over 7 to 10 days, and it can go back that far and have that much of a lagging indicator in terms of how hydrated you are on a regular basis. Caffeine, if you're like me, that's probably my biggest crutch, or it's the thing I shouldn't do as much of, but that's drink a lot of caffeine. So I try to pair that with like, oh, I drink something caffeinated, I'm going to drink some water with it and try to balance that out as much as I can. Your fitness level has a lot to do with it, and that comes to like body composition too. If you have a lot of muscle, you have more storage for glycogen. You can probably go longer without needing fuel. If you have more body fat than muscle, you're going to kind of peter out a lot quicker, and you're going to need to keep taking things in because you don't have the reserves of fuel. And if you're in better shape, you're just more efficient at doing stuff. So you're probably not going to need nearly as much as somebody that's not as in good a shape, and they're going to kind of fall apart a little bit quicker. I mean, really, that's everything for the presentation. Shameless plug here at the end, but what is nutrition coaching? And at Nutrition First, what I do is I work with people based on your needs. If it's getting better at whatever physical activity you want to do, we do that. I work with a lot of couples because they're trying to have goals working together where they're trying to lose weight and get healthy, and they're trying to learn how to be healthier in their lives. And I always say everything is a custom nutrition education program. So I want you to learn not only what to do with your nutrition, but how you can check yourself in the future and how you can be on track with what you're heading towards for your goals, and eventually be your own coach. I don't want you to need me. I want you to be able to do all this stuff on your own and have the tools and the knowledge to make it all work for yourself. And everybody I work with, it's very, I like to call it like a VIP kind of program. I do a custom exercise movement prescription. So we meet, I do a movement assessment. We talk a lot about mindset and the pillars of health, how that affects nutrition, movement, and recovery, or what I like to call like stress and recovery. And then the kind of last part there is like, I want you to have an exit strategy. I want you to know what you're doing on your own. I want you to have this kind of operating manual for your life and your lifestyle. And because I really want to know you, and I want you to ask questions, and I want to make sure if what I'm doing and how we would set something up for you works with what you are thinking and the direction you want to go. I offer a free phone call. I call it a strategy call. I say they're 30 minutes, but a lot of times we talk for 45 minutes or an hour and talk about everything that you're looking for, your goals, what you've tried in the past. I try to give you some easy things to work on right now and give you a plan. And then you can decide between all those questions if you and I working together would be helpful. And that's just what I do. That's how I got in touch with Chris. And I just thought, like, this is a great opportunity. This is about women empowering themselves and getting out and exploring and having fun and being healthy. And so I thought it was a really good kind of marriage between the two and what I offer. And I know we didn't get too many people on it today, but doing this stuff in the future, I'll talk about whatever interests you guys in the realm of nutrition and movement and being healthy. And that's kind of the end of the presentation part. If anybody has questions, I would encourage you to just unmute yourself and ask a question, ask away. We got some good questions along the way. So anybody have any questions about, well, actually I have a question. So what is the main activity that everybody likes to do? Is it hiking or running or sports?
Hiking for me. Backpacking would be second. Cool. Because of how much I'm having to carry with me. And like I was telling you earlier, I'm going to start getting back into doing actual physical like exercises. Mm-hmm. So that's the third one, is something I'm going to slowly start incorporating now.
Well, Nicole said hiking and losing weight. And there's I think there's two major kind of components to both of those. And Chris was just saying it too, is, hiking. So this kind of lower intensity, typically, and that goes back to our levels of intensity, and burning body fat, those kind of go hand in hand. But the most important thing when it comes to being healthy, having a good body composition, and metabolically being healthy is having muscle to support all that. And muscle is by far the most important organ in our body. And it helps us be healthy, move around, kind of protects us from maybe not so great habits, which can be like, oh, if I eat, a piece of cake, but I have pretty good muscle to fat ratio, my body can kind of deal with that easier. It keeps us a little more metabolically healthy. Tammy said hiking, Zumba, walking, great. Love all that. What I notice a lot with women, and pretty much every woman I work with, they may do some stuff at the gym, but if they do, it's really pretty light weights, high repetition. They do more classes, body pump, bar classes, and they like to do a lot of cardiovascular activities. So I consider that like swimming, cycling, running, walking, spin, all those things. And those are all great things. But what I find is the most efficient thing for getting healthy, losing weight, feeling good is a combination of resistance training. So typically that means working from machines to free weights to doing some heavier lifting of weights, which just sounds super intimidating to people, and some higher intensity activities. We can throw out the term of CrossFit. It's really just looking at getting your heart rate pretty high for short amounts of time, having adequate recovery, and then repeating that for not very long, even 7 to 10 minutes of some harder intervals will feel like a 30-minute workout or 45 minutes of running on the treadmill, because it's that much intensity in there. And that's what really kind of drives the change metabolically too. So it sounds like, well, it's dark now, but hiking season's coming up, so that's good. Less snow, better weather. Anybody have any specific questions to themselves? Like, whenever I go hiking, this happens to me, or I've tried this drink before and it upset my stomach, or anything like that I can try to help with?
I can think of a lot of things. I find myself, so there's a really hard hike here in Las Cruces. I tend to guide hikes up there to the Oregon Needle. That one I find myself like, there's only probably been 2 times out of the multiple times I've been up there where nutrition wise, I felt like my body was on point. All other times, like I find myself after mile 3, my body drastically drops in energy and I'm fatigued. I'm having to hike super slow. I find myself like, of course I'm the leader, so I cannot snap at people, but I'm very, my patience feels so tested then. But I have to tell everybody, sorry, I need to stop. I need to munch on something, and I have to give myself some time for my body to absorb it. I try to be more mindful, and like those gels, that's something new I'm starting to try to, like, I don't know if that's going to help. This last time I struggled, but the time before that, it was like I was on top of the world and things were fantastic. So I don't write down what I'm eating, which could be an error on my end, because then I run into that issue and I don't know how to fix it.
Yeah, my first thought with that is, even if it seems a little anal, like writing it down, what gets measured gets managed. So if you're like, oh, I did this, this, and this, and I felt terrible, then you can change a few things around the next time. Or if you're like, oh, I felt great this time, what did I do? Either way, it's going to give you positive feedback to what to do the next time. But it sounds like a lot of what you're describing is you get into it, you start burning through your muscle glycogen, so kind of your stored energy, and then you didn't get anything in your body soon enough. So then your body's like, oh my gosh, I got to go to like stored body fat, which is a way slower process of getting energy out of it. And that's when you feel, I lovingly call that like hypoglycemic. So it's like hypoglycemic, you don't have enough blood sugar, and then you get to that bitchy point where you're just like, okay, everybody stop, like we got to. So I would say next time, snack on something earlier than you think you need it. Like take a gel like 45 minutes or an hour into it, and then keep sipping out of your bottle with a little bit of electrolytes in there, and then see how you feel like 90 minutes into it. Maybe then that's when you have a few more calories. Maybe it's something more solid at that point. You have a little granola, or you have something that's like a little more filling, because the gel is going to get in real quick and you can just keep hydrating. Whereas the next time at 90 minutes or so, you might need something actually solid with it, and then just keep hydrating through. And I bet that'll keep you from hitting that big drop and then having to wait for it to kind of recover before you can start going again. Okay. That'd be something to try, and then track it and see what happens.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Of course. And then Nicole said, do you have any recommendations for dehydrated meals or backpacking meals? If you want to try some of those, they're actually pretty good anymore. I used to eat some pretty gnarly ones when I was doing a lot of that 15 or 20 years ago. But go to REI. They have like gourmet setups for meals, and those are absolutely fantastic. I don't have any specific ones that I've used because I haven't used them for years, but they save you a ton of weight. Like you can take a bunch of that stuff with you if you're doing like multi-day hikes, or you're camping for, 4 or 5 days in a row. And then literally all you need is boiling water and rehydrating them, and they're pretty darn good. And you're going to get pretty good nutrients out of them. I used to do a lot of my own food dehydrating, and I would do a lot of jerkies and fruit, and I didn't ever really experiment much beyond like, dehydrated chicken and rice, and then I could just rehydrate that, and it was quick and simple, carbs and protein. But go to REI, they have a great selection, and then you can kind of find something you like, and then you can probably order stuff and get it cheaper than REI too. As much as I love REI, they're not exactly inexpensive. So, you can get stuff cheaper just ordering it too. So that would be my suggestion, Nicole. Is try it out. I've had my kids eat some before just because they think it's space food. So I'm like, oh, here you go.
I have the only thing about the dehydrated food from like REI and stuff, they can give you digestive issues.
Yeah, it's definitely something to try.
Yeah.
And then take out later, like take it on. Don't go buy like 10 of them and then go for a week in the woods. You might be like offending animals left and right out there. So
okay, I just wanted to make sure everyone's aware of that.
Well, and I think the deal is like they're super compressed nutrients. So it's like this high dosage if you don't get the hydration factor right. And so you're probably getting quite a bit of sodium and some preservatives in there that are going to keep it from going bad. So then it's like this big dose of that stuff. I mean, that's my thought. So probably have to drink quite a bit with them and make sure you're hydrated with it. So, well, cool. I don't know if anybody else has anything else. Oh, Nicole says, I'm trying to lose weight and was wondering how much protein I should be eating. Ooh, that's the $1 million question, Nicole. So I tell people you can either, depending on how much weight you're trying to lose, and I usually break this into above or below. So if you have less than 50 pounds you want to lose, then we can look at what your current weight is, and I multiply that by 0.8. So if you weighed 200 pounds times 0.8, you'd want to eat 140 grams of protein a day. So that's a simple number just because I can do that math. But if you had more than 50 pounds to lose, now we look at what your goal weight would be. So say you weighed 250 pounds and you wanted to weigh 160 pounds, we would take that 160 pound number and we would go off 1 gram per pound. So we'd go at 160 grams of protein per day. That's getting a lot into the science of macros, so to speak. But yeah, that's usually the biggest struggle point for people is women tend to undereat protein significantly, and protein is the most thermogenic. So it costs the most calories to burn when we eat it, but it's also the hardest to store as fat. And it gives us the most, I don't want to use the word energy because we don't really get energy from protein, but it gives us the most efficient repair qualities. So it helps us build muscle. It helps us repair from all the things that go on during the day. Everything from growing your nails and your hair to like a cut in your skin and all that kind of stuff. So the first thing I do, and if we get to this point when I work with somebody where we're actually tracking macros, I call it protein anchored macros. So we make sure that that protein gets met as like a priority. So we say you have 150 grams of protein we want you to eat a day, and you're going to eat 3 meals, then you need to get 50 grams of protein at each meal, and we figure out how you can do that the most efficiently. And it's usually working up to that. I mean, a lot of people, if they've been under eating protein for a significant amount of time, you need to work up to it because you don't have the digestive enzymes to be able to digest that much protein right away, and it'll cause you to feel a little bloated and not feel so good. And so we kind of work up to it maybe over 2 or 3 weeks, and that starts to help you be able to digest the protein a little more efficiently. But it's critical to not only losing weight, but to being healthy, growing muscle, feeling good. So doing a multi-day hike is better to have meals more carb heavy than protein. Yeah. Say you're doing a multi-day hike, pack a lot of your carbs around your hike. So some carbs and a little bit of protein before, carbs during, carbs and a little bit of protein after. And then if you have another meal, so say your hike got done at 2 and you're hanging out at the campfire, or you're just like chilling at the camp, that meal you have for dinner, that should be more protein and less carbs, and then some decent amounts of fat, because now your body's just ready to digest and repair from the day, and it's not as much work to digest the protein when you're not moving around, and so there'll be a lot lower chance of having like some gastrointestinal problems. And so think about carbs around your hike, and then think about getting your proteins, fats, and just a little bit of carbs away from your hike, in the evening is typically how it happens. If that makes sense. Okay, good question, Tammy. I like that one. Yeah, cool. All right, what do you think, Chris? Think we're good?
I think we're good. And then you're recording this. There's a couple of people that have said they weren't able to join because work ended up happening in their life. So
okay,
maybe sharing this with them will be a good resource for them as well.
Cool. Yeah, we'll put the, it puts it all together nice with Google Meet, and so we can either post it in the Facebook page. I think that's possible. I think we can even email it out to people too. So that would be an easy way to do it. We'll figure out the most efficient way. I'll ask Emily since she knows how to do all that stuff.
Okay, yeah. And then just let me know and I'll share it. We really appreciate your time, Brant. And maybe after people see this first presentation, they might think of other topics, or I can also ask another topic and we can kind of go from there.
Yeah, that'd be great. I'd love to talk some more. Let me know what you guys want to know more about or talk to me about. If anybody has questions about their own health and nutrition, just go to my website. I'll send everybody the PDF for the presentation of stuff today, but it's just nutritionfirstcoaching.com, and you can sign up for just a free strategy call, and we just chat about you and see if I can help you out. All righty. Have a good night, ladies.
Thank you for joining, and thank you so much, Brant.
Okay, you bet.
Okay, have a good one. Bye.